a bunch of years ago in the state of New York, a researcher pulled all these supplements off the shelves and actually tested what was in them. And
Really?
the comment was most of the stuff is ground up houseplants. And the attorney general of the state of New York was so disgusted.
Wow.
Months he forced all these stuff off the shelves in the whole state of New York. Now,
Wait, I just have to make sure I heard you correctly. Ground up houseplants?
his quote on his study was most of the stuff is nothing but ground up houseplants.
Did they mean literally or just the equivalent thereof?
Well, literally, like some of the herbal stuff.
Can autoimmune disease really be stopped before it starts? Dr. David Bilstrom says yes. And what he shares in this episode might change the way you think about your health, your genes, and your children's health. I'm Amy Hartshorn, and this is the Green Living Now podcast, where we question what's normal, expose what's toxic, and uncover what it really takes to live clean, feel vibrant, and stay that way. Let's get started. Hello, Dr. Bilstrom. Welcome.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here.
And I love your sunny beach location, even if it is virtual.
Nature is good for human health and well-being.
Absolutely. All that vitamin D that's being produced there, right? So
Absolutely.
I would love to know what type of doctor you are and how you got into doing what you do.
So my goal is to change the way that autoimmune disease is dealt with worldwide for children and adults. There's an absolute epidemic of autoimmune disease in children and adults, including so many chronic diseases that historically we didn't think were autoimmune actually turn out to be autoimmune. The immune system is so important, so much more important than we thought. And so my specialty is preventing and reversing autoimmune disease in entire families because it's run in families. And if a parent has an autoimmune disease, a chronic disease, we know where the children are going,
Interesting.
stop them from going there before they get there. Or if a child develops an autoimmune disease or chronic disease, we know where the parents are going because things run in families. They just haven't gotten there yet. And because it is so incredibly hard to stay healthy nowadays, truly, if you're not doing something really profoundly good for your system, you're going in the wrong direction.
Yeah. So if you would just help us understand that piece about autoimmune diseases in families. When you
Sure.
say if the parents have an autoimmune disease, then you can look to the children and vice versa. Can you say a little bit more about what that means?
Sure. Well, I'll give you a nice statistic. And then if I can back up about that
Perfect.
genetic thing. And so we know the science is very clear that when a parent gets rheumatoid arthritis, the autoimmune disease that attacks your joints,
Right.
basically when you get an autoimmune disease and you start attacking your own body parts, you're basically self-destructing. It is never going to be a good idea to self-destruct. That is very counterproductive to stay
Absolutely
healthy.
agree.
But the science says when a parent has rheumatoid arthritis, the child has not twice the risk, not 3 times the risk, not even 5 times the risk. It's 5.4 times the risk of getting type 1 diabetes
Oh
than
my
anybody.
goodness.
And that's the diabetes where the immune system attacks the pancreas, you stop making insulin, then you're stuck
Wow.
with insulin shots, insulin pumps your whole life. But truly, we can even get that reversed, right? And so you go, oh my goodness, if a parent has it, we need to see the kids so they don't get that kind of stuff. But then when you look at this, you say, well, the child might develop the type 1 diabetes at a young enough age. The parent hasn't even gotten the rheumatoid yet, right?
Really?
And so we see this, and it runs in families. And to your point, we used to think that the genes, our DNA is just long lines of strings of genes that tell the cells what to do. We used to
Right.
think that our genes were hardwired. Whatever we got, good, bad, otherwise, from parents, grandparents. And when you start seeing, parents and grandparents, let's say, getting these health issues that you wouldn't want and you probably wouldn't wish worst enemy, you go, well, geez, I hope I didn't get their genes. But what it turns out is not what genes we have, it's which ones get turned on and turned off. And so this is epigenetics, the thing
Right.
that alter gene expression without changing the genetic code itself. And it turns out that everybody's got a ton of bad genes. Everybody's got a ton of good genes.
Yeah.
Well, what you got to do, and if you're really healthy, well, you've turned off the bad, turned on the good. Well, as you
Right.
start getting unhealthy, you start getting these different health issues. Well, now you've been turning on the bad, turning off the good. And because this is tending to happen in every cell in the body at the same time, that's one reason why it's so easy to get like one thing you don't want. And then there's a second and a third and a fourth. And you're like, how the heck can all this stuff be going the wrong way?
Yeah.
Well, Genetics is a big reason why that happens.
So help me understand, because I know somebody personally whose child was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when they were only 3. And his mom has a lot of health problems. I don't know if she's ever been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, but her belief, based on what the doctors told her, was that it was caused by hoof and mouth disease. Does that make any sense?
Probably not.
Okay,
Uh, what they're suggesting is that it was caused by an infection,
correct.
and that part is correct.
Oh,
Type 1 diabetes is really interesting. I think it says a lot. And so let's say in children. So I see children from all over with all kinds of autoimmune disease, including 70% of all autism is one particular autoimmune disease.
oh, really?
So this type 1 diabetes is really interesting because you can see chronic disease coming 100 miles away if you know what tests to run, and
Oh,
you have plenty of time to turn something around before you get there. And so when I see a child with autoimmune disease, let's say, for example, juvenile rheumatoid arthritis,
hmm,
but you can be the cutest little 10-month-old with a knee the size of a basketball, a 7-year-old can't even walk anymore. So we do blood tests. We are going to see why they got this, okay, including what infections are driving this process. And
okay.
almost universally on these children with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, other autoimmune diseases, their pancreas is already starting to not make insulin well.
Huh.
And it's not uncommon for me to see that their pancreas isn't even making insulin. Basically stopped making insulin. You ask for a blood test on insulin level, and it's so low they can't even find it, like less than 1. Okay.
Gee.
So in children, basically you can get type 1 diabetes for 1 to 3 years before that bad event called a diabetic ketoacidosis event.
Right.
Blood sugar goes over 1,000. You're going to die if you can't get to the hospital quick enough and get
Yeah.
IV insulin and IV fluids. But
Right.
fighting the fight with really no insulin for 1 to 3 years. In adults, it's 3 to 7 years. Okay.
Oh,
So you can see this stuff coming a mile away and fix it. Now,
okay.
when you said my friend's child has type 1 diabetes, but she doesn't have rheumatoid arthritis, one thing to remember truly is it's not like hundreds and hundreds of different autoimmune diseases. There are names depending on what body part is attacked, but truly it's
Okay.
really one disease that can attack any body part. And so this is why when you get one autoimmune disease, one body part attack, it's so easy to get a second, third, fourth, fifth, because it's not like a whole new disease. It's
Right.
just well, you didn't fix and get rid of the first one. And the reason why I got the first one now,
Mm.
same reason I got the second, third. So I've seen like 8-year-olds with 4 autoimmune diseases. I can't tell you how many women in their 20s I've seen with like 6, 7 autoimmune diseases.
Yikes.
And so here's an autoimmune disease of any kind of parent. We know their children at is profound risk of getting an autoimmune disease and vice versa. But this type 1 diabetes is really fascinating. So this infectious part of stuff is one thing we know the science is very clear on is infections are part of all chronic disease, including all autoimmune disease. They
Huh.
tend to be the infections that drive chronic disease, which are
Okay.
different ones that give a obvious disease, which would be sort of like, hey, I got a high fever and chills. Well, I must have some kind of infection.
Okay.
The ones that drive chronic disease are really sneaky. They get into the body and they hide from the immune system. So you don't get the immune system reaction to traditional like high fever and chills or profound diarrhea, right? But over time, it creates this chronic smoldering inflammation that just builds, 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 builds. And then,
Okay.
holy cow, where's all this inflammation driving chronic disease coming from? So the same process that drives type 1 diabetes, and I've done different videos about this, is actually the same process that drives breast cancer. So what
Hmm.
happens is there are these infections that drive chronic disease. Some of them get in from the outside world, like mycoplasma, herpes virus 6, the tick-borne diseases, these kind of things.
Yeah.
A lot of different viruses do this. Epstein-Barr virus is one that gets in everybody, hides. Our immune system keeps it dormant and never bothers us. If it ever wakes
Right.
up, it's driving chronic disease, including like childhood leukemia. It's driving multiple sclerosis. It's driving all kinds of different stuff. There's another set of viruses called enteroviruses, and enteroviruses suggest by the name this inside. So these
Right.
viruses, one particular one that I think is really the biggest, baddest one, but a good example of this stuff is called Coxsackie virus
Oh, yes. I've
in
heard
the
that.
human gut. Have you heard that one?
I
So
have.
it's in the human gut. Okay. So there's a lot of bad bugs in the gut,
Hmm.
good bugs in the gut. You take antibiotics, you take Motrin, Advil, a lot of meds, they're going to kill the good and the big
Right.
bad guys get to overgrow, right? So that's that intestinal microbiome. But what happens is when we get a leaky gut, in more traditional medical terms, it's now called intestinal permeability disorder.
Oh,
There's things that
okay.
are in the gut that can get through the leaky gut wall into the bloodstream and go all over trying to create chronic disease. So on a blood test, as I'm trying to figure out why somebody has this chronic disease, autoimmune disease,
Right.
any lab can run these labs. It's not like they got to go to a special lab. Anybody can do it.
Yeah.
Well, order Coxsackie B, like in boy, Coxsackie B, and
Okay.
there's 6 different kinds. So you do a blood test. Well, Coxsackie B4 likes to translocate from the gut past the leaky gut wall in the bloodstream, go to the cells in the pancreas that make insulin and knock out production.
Mm.
Coxsackie B3 likes to translocate from the gut to the leaky gut wall in the bloodstream, go in the breast tissue and create breast cancer.
Huh.
And so I think it's a good example of how cancer is really the flip side of the same coin, this autoimmune disease. Everything that drives autoimmune
Mm.
disease, cancer and vice versa. Anything you do to prevent autoimmune disease, you're preventing cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Anything to reverse autoimmune disease, get it to go away, you're really doing your due diligence to prevent cancer as well. And so
Mm-hmm.
here's these infections. Now, every autoimmune disease, even though they're all kind of one big one, they all have their really cool uniqueness to them. But this translocation of Coxsackie virus, for example, that's a big commonality in breast cancer, type 1 diabetes, that kind of thing.
So, what makes somebody more susceptible to these viruses and infections sort of sneaking into their system as opposed to having their immune system strong enough to not allow them to take hold and do damage?
Well, one thing is that epigenetics. And so one thing we're trying to do is not only make children and adults healthier, but actually make future generations healthier. So
Yeah.
we know that there's specific things that we can do to optimize epigenetics, turn off the bad genes, turn on the good genes. Harvard
Mhm.
16 years ago did a great study and they go, that's how meditation works. Repetitive,
Oh,
progressive muscle relaxation, Tai Chi, Qigong, all these things. It works through epigenetics
huh.
and a ton of other stuff that work through epigenetics. And so what we want to do, reverse chronic disease, prevent it, we optimize epigenetics. But we really want to optimize epigenetics in people before they conceive a child
Mm-hmm.
as epigenetics, not so much the genes. I mean, the genes do, but that's not important. It's which ones get turned on and turned off is much more
Right.
important. Epigenetics. If you have altered epigenetics before you conceive a child, not only are you passing on bad epigenetics to your child, but you're actually passing them on to the next 6 to 8 generations. We're actually the product of the previous 6 to 8 generations. So if something
Okay.
traumatic happened to somebody, something happened to alter their epigenetics that
Right.
ultimately kind of drove them to have health issues. You keep passing it on from generation to generation. And I think kind of the point of your podcast, there's so many things in our world nowadays, like toxins and all these kind of things that really make it incredibly challenging to stay healthy.
Yeah.
This is where multiple generations have been dealing with this kind of stuff.
Right.
How that bad epigenetics is just getting passed on from generation to generation to generation, kind of gathering steam now. And this is
Mm-hmm.
like in children. Oh my gosh, if it's not autism spectrum disorder, it's developmental delay. Well, if it's not that, it's ADD, ADHD. Well, if it's not
Mm-hmm.
that, it's anxiety, depression. Well, if it's not that, it's schizophrenia, migraine, seizures. But then we have an epidemic of cancer. Colon cancer used to be the 43rd most common cancer. Now it's the second most common, and it's showing up in 20 and 30-year-olds.
Wow.
But having heart attacks in their 20s and 30s rather than their 60s and 70s, cataracts, macular degeneration, you name it, type 1, type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
Type 1 diabetes that we touched on used to be called childhood onset diabetes,
Oh, right.
but then adults started getting it. And rather than the powers that be go, what are adults doing getting a childhood disease? We got to figure this out. What
Yeah.
they said was, well, we can't call it childhood diabetes anymore. So we're going to call it type 1 diabetes. That'll take care of it, and you're like, you missed the point. Adults are
Oh my
getting
gosh.
childhood diseases. Adult onset diabetes, the insulin resistant diabetes was called adult onset diabetes. Now kids get it. So
Right.
now we call it type 2 diabetes because you can't call it adult onset because kids
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
So all of these things, including this incredible epidemic of, dementia and Alzheimer's
Gosh. Yeah.
in like 40-year-olds getting that stuff. It is so hard to stay healthy.
So When I've heard the term epigenetics, I think I first heard it from Dr. Bruce Lipton. Are you familiar with him?
I know the name.
Yeah. And my understanding from what he said was that only about 10% of things get passed on through genes, but the 90% has to do with the environment. So it's where the person is living, what they're eating, what are they being exposed to. Is that true in your experience, or is that not accurate?
Well, I think it depends on the person, right?
Okay.
There's a lot of bad genes, and so there's a high percentage of ones that get turned on they don't want. But
Yeah.
but again, that's a great example of how the world we live in works through epigenetics.
Hmm.
How we fix things can also work through epigenetics. And I think it's fascinating that the body actually makes things on its own
Mm.
that work through epigenetics.
Okay.
Now,
Can you give us an example of what that would be?
so let me give you an example of how we fix the gut in a way that fixes everything.
Perfect. Okay.
So a big central mechanism is every cell in the body needs vitamin D. You were so kind to say, what a great background you have.
Yes.
Your vitamin D. So vitamin D, every cell needs it. Every cell has receptors for vitamin D, just like every cell in the body has a receptor for insulin.
Right.
So insulin will attach to an insulin receptor in a cell, tell the cell how to control blood sugar.
Okay.
Well, those insulin receptors can become resistant to insulin. You can have all the insulin in the world. It's not going to be able to attach and do the work. It's almost like you don't
Mm.
have insulin. Here's
Mm.
type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance. Same thing happens with vitamin D. But researchers back in 2016, back at University of Illinois, Chicago, I'll give them a little shout out if you don't mind, because that's where I went to med school,
Sure.
the University of Illinois. And they figured out that there's more vitamin D receptors in the gut than any other body part. So
Oh,
vitamin
that's
D
fascinating.
is even more important to the gut than any other body part. But these
Okay.
receptors can become resistant to vitamin D. Vitamin D receptor resistance, VDR resistance. And when that happens, it messes up the gut in a way that messes up everything. They said, hey, it looks like if you fix this, it fixes everything. Now, the study they originally published was it will reverse the autoimmune diseases of the gut, like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. It fixes the intestinal microbiome so well that you get rid of these recurrent infections like H. pylori and C. diff. They're
Mm.
so hard to get
Oh,
rid of.
yes. I've heard of those.
The gut and the body as a whole. And how you do it is with three things:
Okay.
daily vitamin D.
Dosage do you recommend typically?
Well, everybody's different.
Okay. So it depends on what your levels are, probably.
Yeah. So on a blood test, it should be between 70 and 90.
Okay.
Now, if you have Parkinson's, you want to be more than 100. You have
Uh-huh.
cardiovascular, you want to be more than 95. 70 and 90 is ideal. So usually start a dose, 5,000, 10,000 a day, and then wait 8 weeks and check a level and then modify it based on what your level is.
Okay.
Probiotics,
Yep.
naturally, right? They live in our gut.
Yep.
But they get decimated by all kinds of different things, including stress and antibiotics. And the third thing that people might not be super familiar with, 'cause I think everybody knows vitamin D and probiotics, is
Yep.
butyrate. Well,
Oh,
butyrate made by the good bacteria in the gut, butyrate, butyrate, naturally occurring. Good
okay.
bacteria make a ton of important things, serotonin and GABA and melatonin.
Oh,
Well, they make short chain fatty acids, and butyrate's one of them.
okay.
You take the three, they're all available in capsule form. You fix the vitamin D receptor resistance.
Hmm.
Vitamin D receptors wake up. Now the vitamin D can attach and do the work. Good bacteria numbers go up, bad guys go down. You get rid of this excessive inflammation in the gut. The gut lining actually starts making proteins specifically designed to keep bad bugs away long term, called
Okay.
antimicrobial peptides. And they said, wow, this is fantastic, but it looks like if you fix the gut this way, you can fix about anything. Well, then 6 months later, the same researchers came out and they said, well, actually, the study, I'm going to quote the title of the study, this is a nuclear weapon against metabolic syndrome, which is diabetes,
Hmm.
obesity, this kind of stuff. And we even 2/3 of Americans are pre-diabetic. So we have this epidemic. They called it a nuclear weapon against that. Well,
Hmm.
then there's these hallmarks of what happens to the intestinal microbiome when this happens. So then a couple of years later, Harvard Journal of Psychiatry comes out and they go, well, if you fix the gut this way, you can treat major depressive disorder. Another psych journal comes out and goes, well, if you fix the gut this way, the hallmark of what happens when you fix this, it changes personality traits. People become more outgoing and more social.
Oh my gosh. And this is all
And
just by fixing the gut in a different, and when you
yeah,
say in a different way, is that meaning different supplements or different foods, or
these
how do you
these
define
three
that?
things as a supplement.
So those three things that you mentioned, the vitamin D, and is it D3?
I like D3
D3.
personally.
So vitamin
Probiotic,
D3, probiotics, and the butyrate. Okay.
yeah, I
Just
just
those three things
series of
can
lectures.
fix all of these different things that you just talked about?
Yeah, and so I just did a series of lectures on breast cancer prevention. Nobody talked about prevention. All they talk about is early detection.
Exactly.
And it's so sad because this whole year they spent a lot of time saying, well, geez, younger and younger women are getting this, right? And,
Mm.
and I go, well, yeah, because nobody's doing anything to prevent. But this whole series of articles I quoted where they talk about how this Coxsackie B3 translocates the breast tissue, creates this inflammation, infection driving Crohn's disease, driving breast cancer. Well, how do you fix it?
Yeah.
Vitamin D, probiotic, and this thing called butyrate. Now, they didn't mention the vitamin D receptors in this one, but they said that's how you fix it. I'm
Okay.
like, fix
That's
it.
wild. So do you have recommendations for brands? Because my belief is that if you go to CVS and you buy something that's called a vitamin there, it's not the same as if you're buying it on like Standard Process or some other type of company. Do you
So
have
true.
recommendations on which ones you think are the most effective, viable, best ingredients, that kind of thing?
Yeah. 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 You're so right. I mean, most of what you get actually back a bunch of years ago in the state of New York, a researcher pulled all these supplements off the shelves and actually tested what was in them. And
Really?
the comment was most of the stuff is ground up houseplants. And the attorney general of the state of New York was so disgusted.
Wow.
Months he forced all these stuff off the shelves in the whole state of New York. Now,
Wait, I just have to make sure I heard you correctly. Ground up houseplants?
his quote on his study was most of the stuff is nothing but ground up houseplants.
Did they mean literally or just the equivalent thereof?
Well, literally, like some of the herbal stuff.
Oh my
Yeah,
word. So
it's really
not even what it was said to be on the label.
correct. And that is one of the big things that happened with multiple studies is in the pharmaceutical industry, you have to have your products independently tested for purity and content. So content is, does it have in it what it says? Purity is, does it have anything in it that you don't want? That's not the case of the supplement industry, right? And so most of the stuff you get over the counter, does it have in it what it says? Has it
Okay.
that you don't want, including things that they use as fillers. That's like the last thing you
Right.
use is fillers, but also they really compromise any kind of absorption. There's pharmaceutical grade supplements. They tend to be called nutraceuticals, implying that they're pharmaceuticals. So the really good companies have their products independently tested by outside companies before selling to the public.
Okay.
I have my line that I like because I think they're really, really great. They have exactly what we need to turn this stuff around. There's
Yeah.
other companies that I like, Pure Encapsulations, New Medica, there's other ones out there. And I would say if you go to see a functional medicine practitioner, they're going to share
Right.
with you these products that they know to be of high quality, nothing toxin and that kind of things.
Are there no non-pharma type vitamin companies that you think are doing what they're supposed to be doing?
It's interesting. The pharmaceutical industry, they want to patent things so they can
Yeah.
make profit, right? And so invariably over the years, they've gone, wow, this is something really important. A lot of companies are selling this kind of thing.
Yep.
We should make something like it. Well, the problem is, you can't really patent something that's already out there,
Or that's from nature, correct?
ideally from nature too. And so, like an example that I always thought was an excellent example of this is we know, because you talk a lot about toxins, we know the body has to be able to detox. We're just living in such a
Correct.
toxic world. And if you can circle me back to how toxic children are at birth, I'd love to talk about that. Um,
Mhm.
so all these toxins we got to get rid of. Well, we have to
Yes.
have fully methylated, activated B vitamins in our system in order to
Mhm.
run detox pathways, for example, dump toxins into the gut so we can poop them in the toilet. So high quality nutraceutical companies for decades now have made fully methylated B vitamins. You got your
Okay.
methylcobalamin, your tetrahydro of methylfolinic acid for folic acid, all these kind of things. Well, the pharmaceutical industry, like 20 years ago, says, hey, we should do that too. But they couldn't patent it because all these companies had already had the high quality. So what they did is they only methylated like half the bees and the other half they didn't. Well, nobody does that because that's ridiculous.
Right.
They could patent it because nobody had done it. And so it became
Oh
a
my goodness.
pharmaceutical thing. And you go, hey, here's this prescription one. Can I use this one? Because my insurance won't pay for it.
Right.
And I look at it and I can figure out how they patented it because nobody would do it this way. Nobody's
Yeah,
not this way because it's ridiculous and it's not going to work like
right.
we know.
So let me make sure I understand. So a nutraceutical company isn't necessarily a pharmaceutical company.
Right. It's ideally
Okay.
a company that has their products independently tested for
Okay.
purity content.
And is that, in your opinion, sort of the gold standard of if any vitamin company, if they have science that can show that some independent body verified the information that they are claiming, then that feels good to you or
best, yeah.
okay, cool. Wow. So, yes, let's go back to what you were starting to say about babies born toxic.
Yeah, and this is part of how, we're getting sicker and sicker. And so I
Right.
think it's about 16 years ago, they said, wow, all this kid stuff is happening, including a lot of this stuff. And it sure looks like toxicity because the brain is very sensitive to toxicity. That well, do children accumulate toxins after they're born and they be on the earth for a while,
Mhm.
or do they have it at birth? Basically, does it come from the mom cross the placenta, get into the baby
Right.
before they're born? So what they
Right.
said was, now this is about 15 years ago or so. Well, we have tens of thousands of environmental toxins that have been put into our system by this time. Well, now we're over 100,000. But back then, the good old days, only tens of thousands. And they said, are any of these found in children at birth? And so what they
Mhm.
decided to do was test for 400 different environmental toxins. And they said, umbilical cord blood of newborns
Yep.
and see any of them are there. Well, on average of the 400 they tested for, on average, the children had 200 of the 400 tested at birth. Every kid, every child had lead, mercury, pesticides, herbicides, flame retardants in their system at birth.
So
And
all of that came from the exposure that the mother was experiencing.
these toxins cross the placenta from the mother to the developing
Okay.
fetus pregnancy. Yeah. Now, of course, no parent knows this, right? So nobody's to be
Right.
blamed for this, but this is why it's
Right,
so
exactly. That was my big wake up call actually was when I was pregnant with my daughter many years ago. I had already learned about food and had worked in a health food store when I was 16, but when I was shopping at a health food store, I found this little book called The Non-Toxic Baby, and that's where I found out about all these toxins in everyday household products that I didn't know about.
sure.
And, that's kind of what got me going into this research of what can I use? What is actually safer than other stuff? And I'm sure it's an ongoing thing. It's not like you have your list and that's it, then you're done. It's like things keep changing. Some of the companies that I used to love either went out of business, like Aubrey Organics, or were bought up by some corporate, entity. And then I wonder about what's the integrity there? Are they still doing the same product formulations? Or even big organic companies with food. If they're doing both conventional and organic, that is a question mark for me. Like, how do
Sure.
I know those bananas are really organic? Just because the sticker says it is, so that's kind of the level that I get to. Do you have a case study or two of people that have turned around illness because of taking those supplements and doing other things that you might have recommended?
Sure. A parent was so thankful for what we were able to do for her 28-month-old
Yep.
that there's a video out there. You can get it via my website, my YouTube channel, but it's on YouTube already. It's called A 2-Year-Old's Story of Celiac Disease.
Oh,
So
wow.
much more than gluten free. And so the basic gist of this case study, and actually I wrote this up for the International Journal of Psychology and Neuroscience a
Oh,
few years
wow.
ago. So right from the get-go, this little boy had bad gut stuff and cognitive emotional stuff going on, brain
This
and
is
gut.
right after birth.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
my. Okay.
Developmental delay, all these other kind of things, lots of bloating and gassiness and all this kind of stuff. And at 14 months of age, they took him to a major pediatric hospital, children's hospital, and they said, oh, he's got celiac disease. Wheat proteins like battery acid bad. You got to get rid of that stuff and he'll be a lot.
Okay.
Well, they did that. He didn't get really better. He just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And so by 28 months of age, they went back to that major center. They said basically, well, he's got profound autism. There's nothing we can do. So the profound autism symptoms that he presented to me with was he'd have these quote unquote fits 10 to 14 times a day where he'd try to smash his head on walls and floors.
Ooh.
The
Okay.
story people have heard before,
Yeah.
and parents have had to deal with this. Well, the parents would try to protect him from himself, but he'd try to
Yeah.
scratch their eyes out. So they came in with like scratches on their face and everything.
Oh, I don't know how they deal with it. Yeah.
And so, what I kind of say is, well, you got to get rid of a food that's bugging you.
Yeah.
But you also got to get rid of the reason why the food's bugging you.
Ah,
Why it's going to keep pushing you in the wrong direction in all these different arenas.
okay.
And so a year later, he was totally great. And the mom, I thought, said profoundly important way of thinking was back when he was that sick, that wasn't
Yeah.
my son. That was my son with really messed up biochemistry, let's say.
Yeah.
A year later, fun loving, happy go lucky,
Mm.
great to
So
be
the
with.
real him showed up.
That's the real him showing up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when people get these kind of health issues, including all the brain stuff, depression, anxiety, people will go, well, that's just me. Everyone in my family is depressed. I'm just a depressed person. I've always been a depressed person. That's
Ah,
just who we are as a family. And I go,
right.
no, not how it works.
Doesn't have to be that way.
You wouldn't come in and tell me I have right knee pain. I'm a right knee pain person. I've always had right knee pain.
Yeah, good
Family
point.
is a right knee pain person.
Yep,
That's just
yep.
part of the family. And you go like, that's so ridiculous, right?
So back to that little boy, was there certain food triggers that you identified? Like, did you do an elimination diet with him?
So foods can bug people two different ways, basically,
Okay.
right away later, immediate
Yep.
delayed reactions. So on most people I see, I'm going to run a food sensitivity test that checks
Okay.
for the delayed hypersensitivity reactions. You eat a certain food protein. In this case, it's only the protein, not the fatty acids or the carbs.
Okay.
Like lactose is a sugar and you can get an immediate reaction, but it doesn't give this delayed reaction. And the delayed reaction is like days, weeks, months, even longer after you consume this food protein. They're still strictly
Oh,
system for months, years afterwards. Well, a long time after you eat it, all of a sudden it whacks the system, creating inflammation. Now, if it doesn't bug you right away, you don't know it's bugging you. So you keep eating until this inflammation just builds.
mhm.
You develop health issues. So sensitivity test, of course, the leaky gut gave him the high sensitivity to wheat proteins. Well, of course, he had other ones too. Well, then we did a blood test and all these classic things showed up, like all these infections, vitamin deficiencies,
Oh,
all these kind of classic things. We did a stool test called the digestive stool analysis. Of
mhm.
course, we found infections down there. Of course, we found high levels of inflammation that created the leaky gut between the infections and the inflammation. He wasn't
Jeez.
digesting his food. His pancreas wasn't making enzymes to digest his food. So all this undigested food was just sitting in his gut, basically going rancid and putrefying right inside the
Ooh,
body.
no wonder the poor
Oh,
child had so many problems. Oh my gosh.
and then we've just fixed that stuff. And a year later, he was totally himself. And so if you're not feeling well, that's not inherently you. That's just you with messed
Right.
up chemistry. And it
Right.
was it
So
all,
did you put him on those 3 supplements too? The probiotics, the vitamin D, and the butyrate?
I did not know about the vitamin D receptor resistance back there. So I didn't
Oh,
use the butyrate back then.
okay.
But
So it was mostly dietary then?
well, we got rid of the foods that were bugging him
Right.
temporarily because you can fix them once you fix the leaky gut. We got his vitamin D optimal. We got him detoxing better. We got him
Oh,
on these B vitamins, fully methylated. We got him on some other vitamins, like I think he was profoundly low in zinc, for
oh,
example.
wow. Okay. So the things that he
And
was deficient in, you supplemented.
yeah.
Yeah.
And he had this classic picture. You see this a lot in people with any kind of brainy thing is when
Okay.
the gut's off, you can't absorb nutrients. So you get vitamin
Mm,
deficiency. When the gut's off, you can't detox, you start accumulating toxins. And so a
yeah.
really cool blood marker is called the zinc copper ratio. So you check serum zinc, serum copper, and you look at how they compare. Both of them should be about 100. Okay.
Okay.
Copper inherently is very toxic to the brain, but it's toxic to the system. You should be 100. He was like 242. Highest I've ever seen. Oh my gosh.
Wow. And what could possibly have led to that? Do you know?
The inability to detoxify because of the disrupted gut and the leaky gut. He just started accumulating all these toxins. That was one of them.
Okay. So it's not that
And
he was necessarily being exposed to more toxins than usual. It's just that his body couldn't get rid of the ones that he was being exposed to and they built up.
correct. And
Okay.
then it should have been about 100, was down around 20.
Ooh. So
And
20 versus 200 something. And so they're
yeah,
supposed to be equal.
and they're supposed to be equal. Yeah. And that imbalance drives this cognitive emotional stuff, but it just creates inflammation every place. So we gave him zinc. We
Yeah.
fixed the gut. Copper came down, zinc came up. His brain
Yeah.
was so happy. We got rid of those infections.
Yeah.
Epstein-Barr virus, mycoplasma, Coxsackie virus will also go to the brain as well. And then a year later, now kids heal a lot faster than adults.
Sure.
And oh, by the way, so butyrate, but the good bacteria in the gut
Yeah.
almost exclusively works through epigenetics. So it's flipping bad genes off and good genes on in every cell in the body. That's why it can prevent and kill cancer cells 5 different ways. at the same time that it fixes brain stuff, lung stuff, all the stuff, naturally occurring. If the good bacteria don't make it, here's epigenetic stuff.
Yeah.
Other supplement I use a ton nowadays. I didn't know about this back when I was a child. The liver makes something called TUDCA, capital
Say it
T,
again.
called TUDCA, capital T,
Tudka.
capital U, capital D, capital C, capital A,
Wow, I've never heard of
short
that.
for tauro urso deoxycholic acid.
Okay.
It's abbreviated, made by the
Yep.
liver. It works through epigenetics. You can take it as a capsule form. It can't be anything cooler than epigenetics, right? Well, and a different mechanism that kills cancer cells. That's pretty cool. But it also is what they call the chaperone molecule. And so this lack of the liver ability to make TUDCA adequately is really tied into all the things we see nowadays called civilization diseases. All these things that I kind of referenced before, they're so much more common now than they used to be. Cancer, autoimmune disease, type 1, type 2 diabetes, heart attack, stroke, brain stuff for kids and adults, cataracts, macular degeneration, you name it.
Yeah.
It's tied into this inability to make TUDCA because we're 80% protein based. If you take away the water. So all
Okay.
hormones are protein, all these different things are protein. So what our cells have to do is make healthy new proteins to take the place of old disrupted proteins, right?
Sure.
Well, there's a specific spot in the cell called the endoplasmic reticulum where new healthy proteins are made. But the things that you share with people, like environmental toxins and stress and not getting out in nature and all this, creates
Yeah.
inflammation right within
Right.
that plasmic reticulum. They call it endoplasmic reticulum stress. Well, then what happens is instead of long, beautiful chains of amino acids forming new proteins, all the hormones, for example, are all proteins, they get misfolded. So this endoplasmic reticulum stress creates what they call the misfolded protein response. So rather than a long, beautiful chain, it gets all globbed up and it's not that protein anymore. But then that globbed up mass creates more inflammation. It kind of gunks up the system. It's already messed up. So with this TUDCA, they call it the chaperone molecule because what it does is it chaperones these proteins through the production process so they do not become misfolded. And so if somebody wants to Google, like go to PubMed, for example, all these scientific articles and put in TUDCA, all caps, and add whatever word you want now, you're going to find something about it. So if you put in TUDCA and autism, here's all this stuff about it. TUDCA and dementia, Alzheimer's, all this stuff about that. TUDCA and cardiovascular disease, all this kind of stuff. It is really a fascinating thing, naturally occurring, right? Body makes it through chaperone molecule, epigenetics. Oh, by the way, I can kill cancer cells in a whole different way,
Yes.
but you can give it to people in a capsule.
Oh,
And,
okay. That was going to be my next question. How do you
yeah,
get it? So you can
and
take it as a capsule form, huh?
yeah. Now you don't have to take it forever, right? So
Okay.
if you fix
Oh,
the system, so the
okay.
liver got dinged, such as preterm babies,
Yep.
from 3 or 4 or more weeks preterm, the liver's not fully formed until 8 months of age. So it's not even fully formed at birth. But preterm babies, livers don't make as much TUDCA as term babies. So
Oh,
preterm infants have a much higher risk of type 1 diabetes
oh,
because
interesting.
TUDCA is super, super important in the ability of the pancreas to make insulin.
Hmm.
A child around the time they're born has jaundice, where the liver gets dinged.
Oh,
The
right. I've
liver will
seen
make as
that
much TUDCA.
in hospitals.
They
Yeah.
have a 25% increased risk of type 1 diabetes. But also, this is such a bad thing early on that the preterm babies and the children with jaundice are much more likely to get type 2 diabetes 4 or 5 decades later.
Oh,
So the liver gets dinged. We ding it a lot with prescription medications, all this other kind of stuff.
yeah.
All this data has come out about Tylenol use during pregnancy. Tylenol hurts the liver, driving autism, kind of, right? And this TUDCA is vitally important for brain because here's these articles about TUDCA and autism, TUDCA and Alzheimer's and dementia.
Right.
So the liver gets sting, can't make enough TUDCA. Well, the liver's got to make a ton of important stuff, tons of important proteins. But when the liver gets sting, it can't make TUDCA and it can't make enough TUDCA to keep itself happy. So the liver can't make all these other important things. And then if it can't make enough TUDCA for itself, it's not making enough TUDCA for every other body part. You give the liver TUDCA,
Yeah.
every body part TUDCA. Well, eventually the liver is healthy, happy now. It makes its own TUDCA, it makes all these other kind of. It's not like you have to use that forever because you want
Right.
her to start doing this work. Just
Exactly.
you want the pancreas to wake up and they can start making insulin again. In type 1 diabetes people, Harvard did a study It's kind of sad, but it's kind of the point I think you're making about pharmaceutical industry versus nutraceuticals, supplements, type 1 diabetes. We have a incredible need for something that can help these folks that is cost effective.
Yep.
What they did in mice, the mice model of type 1 diabetes, they gave them this chemical that totally killed all the cells in the pancreas that make insulin, knocked them all out.
Okay.
And then if they gave them TUDCA within 30 days, the TUDCA made healthy new cells that make insulin and totally reversed the type 1 diabetes of these mice.
Even after all those pancreatic cells were killed?
Holy kill. The TUDCA helps you make new healthy cells. Okay.
Okay.
That's not quite the case in humans. I want to touch base on
Okay.
that. Harvard said, which I thought was very sad, but very poignant on what happens. They go, wow, here's something that's very cost effective, very safe, no side effects. Boy, if this ever became a prescription medicine, we'd really have something here. That the company that manufactured the TUDCA for their study called Body Bio is exactly what I find on my website that I use. Now, in humans, which I think is really cool, is typically type 1 diabetes. We have the cells that make insulin still, the beta islet cell. They've just
Okay.
gone,
Dormant. Yep.
they just don't make it. And so there's a simple blood test to do to figure out whether somebody actually lost the cells and now you don't have insulin, or they're there, but they're just dormant. So the
Okay.
TUDCA makes them up if they're dormant, but the TUDCA will also make healthy new cells that make insulin if you've lost them,
Okay.
and it's available, to anybody.
Wow.
This is really like central mechanism stuff. It's really cool.
So I can't believe it's already been almost an hour.
This is a great
It's so
subject.
fascinating. So, okay, I have two questions for you, and then I feel like we don't want to overwhelm people. What would you recommend to pregnant women for testing to see that they have the right TUDCA levels and whatever other things you feel are needed? And once that baby is born, if let's say somebody's already delivered, what kind of tests do you look for that you can help them get these things balanced before they create bigger issues?
So I think one of the most important things during pregnancy is you want a vitamin D level optimal, 70 to 90.
Okay.
So what they've seen is, even if you're not perfect, boy, the body can really run with something that's important. So if a woman's vitamin D during pregnancy is above 50,
Yeah.
not even perfect, but above 50, she decreased the likelihood of her child ever getting multiple sclerosis by 50%.
Oh,
If you're preventing one autoimmune disease, you're preventing them all. Okay. Right. And if a woman takes probiotics during pregnancy,
yeah.
she has now decreased the likelihood of every pregnancy related complication at the same
Wow.
time. Probiotics, right? Whether that's, blood sugar, blood pressure issues, preeclampsia, preterm birth, complicated delivery, you name it, decrease the risk of all that stuff. And then both the butyrate should be made by the good bacteria, but
Yep. So it's those three supplements again.
and TUDCA, both TUDCA and shown to help with fetal brain development, fetal neural. And also, if I could say this, is you want to get out in the sun.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I did a lecture, and my wife did too. We lectured a lot together in Paris back in the summer of 2024. And it was about the 4 maternal microbiomes during pregnancy that determined the fetal microbiome before the child's even born. Okay. And I've talked about, well, how do you develop these, how they get messed up, how you can fix them.
Right.
Right. And so one thing I said is about a third of the way through pregnancy, there's a lot of baby parts still to put together. 6 more months, liver's not even fully formed until 8 months later. The brain fully formed at 27 years of age. But what body part is already formed in the baby at 3 months of age are retinal cells, back of the eye, not the rods and cones,
Okay.
but these non-image forming retinal cells. So the baby's eyes start seeing light coming through the abdominal and the uterine wall about a third of the way through pregnancy. These non-image forming retinal cells, they project to all these different brain parts, parts involved in metabolism, that keep people from getting obese, parts involved in our mood, our emotions, the part of the brain that oversees the 24-hour circadian rhythm. Every cell has that rhythm. It gets thrown off. Every cell suffers. The nerve that goes directly from these non-image forming retinal cells goes straight to the hypothalamus in the brain. The hypothalamus is on top of the HPA axis, hypothalamus, pituitary gland, adrenal gland. It makes cortisol, stress hormone. The HPA axis is how the body deals with stress,
Oh my
tied
gosh.
into cardiovascular health, hormones, you name it, it's tied into everything, how we deal with stress.
Right.
So by the baby's eyes seeing light coming through the abdominal uterine wall before pregnancy, it helps them develop a healthy HPA axis. Even if the mom is totally stressed out during pregnancy and has her own disrupted HPA axis, there's a great slide I
Oh my
have.
gosh.
Disrupted maternal HPA axis during pregnancy creates a faulty HPA axis in developing fetus. But the baby's eyes seeing light, it develops a healthy HPA axis before they're even born.
That's amazing. So
And
are you talking about sunlight or any kind of light?
while sunlight is the best, but
Okay.
there's a
But
lot of
your light still works?
infrared particularly. And this is where you're hearing so much about
Infrared.
infrared. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
And
I've interviewed some folks about infrared. Okay.
there's a great study. I tell people, like pregnant women,
Yeah.
get outside, pick your shirt up loud and proud,
Yeah.
let the baby's eyes see the sunlight. But a really cool study came out a couple months ago, and they said sunlight's better,
Yep.
but even like tabletop infrareds can be really therapeutic. They even said it can go through clothing. And I hadn't heard that before. They said, well,
Oh,
it's not as good as
wow.
directly to the skin, but can go through clothing. And I go, fantastic. So they said there are frequencies of light that we cannot see that penetrate deep into the human body, like the infrared, specifically near infrared, that dive deep in the body, get to the mitochondria.
Yep.
Mitochondria make ATP,
Yep.
what the cell used to function. This is very important for everybody, particularly the central nervous system, the brain, cord. But they also said, well, the visual system is part of the central nervous system. So what we're going to do is use a tabletop infrared,
Yep.
15 minutes,
15 minutes.
in 24 hours, vision gets better.
Ooh. 15 minutes of, and you said near infrared?
That they did it near infrared specifically.
Okay.
And what was really cool, my first thing was, well, that infrared is being seen by these non-image forming retinal cells because that helps eye health, all this other kind of stuff going
Yeah.
on.
Probably combat some of the screen,
Yes.
looking at screens all the time issues, right?
In this study, they used a mask over the eyes during that
Yeah.
50. So it wasn't the eye seeing it to help the eye health, because a lot of studies will show that, but it was going deep to the mitochondria, making ATP, helping the central nervous system. But the mitochondria are also a vital, vital part of everything, including the immune system and the immune system's ability to get rid of inflammation that drives chronic disease. So I'm like, well, man, that's going to help the immune system immensely, not just
Yeah.
the nervous system. And it's like, oh my gosh, nature is so fantastic for us, right?
Amazing on
Get
so many
outside.
levels.
And so babies use this starting 3 months of gestation.
Yep.
Put all these things together, including because the intestinal microbiome has about a 24-hour clock, that baby's eye seeing light going to the master clock in the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus optimizes intestinal microbiome.
Huh.
So babies do this to set everything up before they're born. But we
Yeah.
can use those same mechanisms to put everything back together in people that have chronic disease, autoimmune disease as well.
Wow. Absolutely amazing. I'm going to have you back because there's
We
so
just got
much.
started, I feel like.
Oh my gosh. We barely scraped the surface, I'm sure. Amazing. So how do people get in touch with you?
So my website is drdavidbilstrom.com.
Okay.
Courses to teach people this stuff who are non-medical, people that are medical,
Yeah.
blog posts. Please follow me on social media. I post all this kind of information, including several of the studies that we've already talked about.
Oh,
I
cool. I'll have to
read
check those
about
out.
them, tell people about this stuff.
Yeah.
And I got over 150 YouTube videos about this stuff, and just about
Oh,
every
nice.
I'm going to do on YouTube, because this is very important. I think that people understand that this is the science. This is not one person's opinion.
Yeah.
I hold up an article and go, this article in the journal of, this is what it says.
Right. Right. Oh, and that reminds me, I wanted you to mention that Google verification thing that you mentioned before we got on.
Oh,
Why
sure.
that's important.
Woo. Is it hard? But I think it should be hard.
Yeah.
Is there's a Google verification process that I went through so that I can say what other people might go, well, that's just somebody's opinion. But because I'm a physician that's passed this really rigorous process, they go, oh, well, he's speaking the science.
Yeah.
This is what it really is. Just
Yeah.
like my course for medical people, that because ideally I want somebody in every community that knows how to do this. Okay, we're
Yeah, gosh,
not gonna
yeah,
go me. It's gotta be somebody in every community knows how to
exactly. You got to
is,
clone yourself.
but
Yeah.
we got CME credits, continuing medical education credits, because in order to
Oh,
do that, you have to show that, well, this is the science, and you can get these credits so that doctors can get credit for going to conferences. Also,
yeah.
like in my book that I wrote a textbook chapter about this. And of course, in a
Mm,
textbook chapter, everything you say has to have a scientific reference. So the textbook
gotcha.
chapter that was relatively short, and it was managing pain in the presence of autoimmune disease, 150 different references. But then I wrote a book, and it's for lay people, it's for medical people, but
Okay.
it's 100 different scientific references in that, because I want everybody to know that I'm not just going to write my opinion. This is what the science says.
Yeah.
And fortunately, the science is very clear why this happens, but
Yeah.
also clear how we can prevent this stuff in the first place, reverse
Mm,
it if well established.
that's fantastic. Wow. Such good work. And did I hear you correctly before we started that you do telehealth visits for folks?
100% telehealth. Yep.
Excellent. Okay. So if somebody has some issue that they're working through, they can contact you through
Love
your website and set up a time
love
to
to help,
meet.
including
Fantastic.
I love children. I love making children happy. Some of my favorite people to turn around are
Oh,
children. Oh
that's
my God.
wonderful.
It is just so rewarding. And of course, I
Mm,
love it. I like making adults better, but seeing a kid, a child,
right.
you
Because
know,
all those years ahead of them, they can be improved.
yeah, it's wonderful.
Wow. That's fantastic. Well, thank you. This has been fantastic.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me, Amy. This has been a lot of fun.
You've been listening to the Green Living Now podcast, where the elegant rebellion comes to life in real conversations, real homes, with helpful tips and real choices. If this conversation lit something up in you, please subscribe so that you don't miss the next ones. And share it with another woman who's ready to take back her power and stop outsourcing her health, her food, and her home to toxic systems. That's how the movement spreads, one awakened choice at a time. And if you're ready to live this work alongside with others and me, join our Elegant Rebellion Circle. You'll find the details at greenlivingnow.com. I'll see you next week. And until then, keep noticing, keep choosing, and keep rising.